It feels like it may be a good time to visit the topic of religious trauma. Whenever people speak about religious trauma, it's always anecdotal. Do you notice that? It's always their personal emotional response to someone else who had some sort of religious authority over them. How someone used God to make them feel like less lovable, less forgivable, less of a person. Perhaps you struggled to connect with God because rather than being a bridge, this authority was a wall. If a parent does not embody for their child the relationship God desires for them, it's likely they will never experience the fullness of the faith in all its glory. And I'm sorry if that's been the case for you. Many people who desire to be spiritual and religious come from homes like this, so they might feel trepidation when it comes to passing along the religious values they wish to impart to their children. Or you might have come from a wonderfully religious home and can't exactly put your finger on what made your experience so beautiful. Therefore, since I am problem identifying and solution oriented, this video is to offer to parents a way to think about how to avoid possibly religiously traumatizing their kids. Since people generally communicate on this issue using personal anecdotes, I shall meet you where you are and use one of my own in order to teach. I do not share any of this to toot my own motherhood horn, and in truth I was hesitant to create this earlier since I feared it would be seen that way, and I'm far from perfect and wish not to alienate anyone or make them feel like less, unironically. I have encountered many religiously traumatized adult children of overbearing religious people, so I decided to share a short story with you concerning how I address certain issues as a religious parent raising religious children. This is an antidote for parents of young children designed to encourage raising psychologically healthy children who are better able to love God. I am a mother to 5 small children, ages newborn to 8. Last Good Friday, I made a point of having no access to electronics in my home for the duration of the day, other than a few teaching videos which I controlled, in order to focus on Christ's sacrifice. This did not sit well with my 6-year-old son. I was standing at my kitchen counter, drinking coffee, when I heard my 8-year-old daughter correct her younger brother, who was turning on a show, by saying, "We aren't allowed to watch TV today." "Why?" my 6-year-old angrily asked. "Because it's Good Friday and Mommy said we couldn't." My 6-year-old blurted out, "I hate Good Friday, and I hate Jesus, and I hate God." Now, of course, this isn't something any Christian mother wants to hear her child say. However, I stood and reflected and understood why my small son had this outburst. I understood why he associated religion with his lack of being able to do what he wanted. His 2 older siblings ran to me, wide-eyed and upset, and said, "Did you hear what he said?" I calmly replied, "Yes." They both stared blankly at me, expecting a reaction. I gave none. "Well, aren't you going to punish him for saying that?" "Why?" I asked my eldest. "Well, because what he said was wrong. It was sinful, and it hurt God's feelings. He is ungrateful." I looked down at my child and asked, "What do you think will happen if I punished him for having those feelings?" She stared blankly back at me. I continued, "Do you think that if he lashed out in anger at God, and I lashed out in anger against him in reply, he would want to love God more?" My 2 oldest still looked confused. I bent down close to them and asked them the answer to a question I tried to ingrain in them. How do you show people God loves them? They looked back and replied, "By loving them how God loves them." That's right. So the best way to make your brother understand that God loves him is by showing him that I forgive him and love him. My 6-year-old son peered in from behind a wall. I looked at him and calmly asked, "What's up? Did you want to talk to me?" He looked relieved, but still said, "No," before slipping back into the next room. So you see, he already knew that his outburst wasn't a positive one. He wasn't ready emotionally to address it with me, and I didn't force him to. About 30 minutes later, it was almost 3 p.m., and I called all my children into the living room to watch a Children's Stations of the Cross video. The same child resisted, and I said, "No, you must do as I ask." This is what we are doing for school today, so come and sit. I am very firm with my children and do not accept blatant disrespect. No matter what, they are still expected to respect and obey me as their parent. Even if I wish to accommodate their feelings for their emotional health, it is not good nor healthy for them to be catered to by me at the expense of being properly disciplined. He sat down by me. I leaned forward to thank him for being a good listener and offered him my hand to hold. He did not wish to hold it, and I did not insist upon it. We all sat together and watched quietly the 10-minute video of the Stations of the Cross. Afterwards, my children all sat thoughtfully for a few moments. My 6-year-old had soaked it in, and while watching it, had taken my hand to hold. I never stopped offering it to him. It was there when he needed it. I asked them, "Do any of you have any thoughts or questions or anything you wish to pray?" My son looked back towards me and whispered, "I'm sorry. I do love Jesus." And he went to hug me. I sat and cradled him and told them all that it was time to pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet. And my embraced son looked up at me and asked if he could lead the first decade. You cannot force anyone else to love and value what you love and value. As parents, it frustrates us to see our children act against the good we wish to instill in them. It frustrates us as parents to give so much to our children, just for them to be ungrateful or lash out at us. I imagine God is entitled to feel much the same way about us. How does He treat us in our response to ungratefulness? Does He smite us? No. In fact, He gives us our next breath. Every breath we take when we choose to sin, He gives to us. Every breath we use to cry out against Him, He gives to us. As a parent, we need to teach our children how to love. If we wish to show them the love of God, then we must love them how God loves them. God does not force Himself on us, so we ought not force Him on others. Rather, what God has done for every individual is seek to show them how much He loves them and wishes to engage with them. Therefore, as parents, this is a key component in our children's upbringing in religion and spirituality, by being for them the kind of love we wish them to experience from God. We are their first steps to understanding faith in the church, by first being the domestic church to them. I do not punish my children when they come to me to confess they've done something wrong, because I do not want them to fear going to confession and seeking forgiveness from God. I do not punish my children for careless accidents, because I love them more than their mistakes, and I tell them I'm showing them that God loves them much the same way. I do not punish my children for not loving God perfectly, because I do not love God perfectly, and He does not punish me for it. If they are hiding out of shame for their behavior, I seek them out and remind them that I love them more than anything they've done, since they matter more to me than any mistake they could possibly make. If a parent does not display for their child how God loves them, how do they expect their child to understand the love of God? Oftentimes, they never do. And that is the root cause of religious trauma of adult children of religious people. Love one another as I have loved you. If you wish to meditate on ways to show your child true love, watch my video, Ways to Show Your Child You Love Them, which I'll link at the end. I'm Regina Lux with Veritas on the Rocks. Now, go slay some dragons.